This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Wisconsin football team back in Madison for winter workouts. Those got going this week and did so with plenty of new faces from the transfer portal and the incoming freshman class. Also, a lot of new faces among the coaching staff, including offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes. He previously worked at Kansas, Baylor, and BYU. Admits it's only been a short time since he's been here, and he hasn't called a bad play or lost a game yet, but he likes the initial feel inside the building.
I sense a hunger, a hunger to prove that this can be a good offense and we can get Wisconsin back to what it's known for. And, at the end of the day, it comes down to winning games, regardless of what we do on offense. And so that's got to lead to the other thing. But I think the early results are good.
In addition to Grimes, Wisconsin moved Kenny Guyton from wide receivers coach to quarterbacks coach, promoted Jack Cooper to safeties coach, and added Jordan Reed from Western Michigan as wide receivers coach. Turning to the Packers, they're also working through additions to their coaching staff, specifically along the defensive line. There have already been 3 reported interviews, including former Bears defensive coordinator Eric Washington. Green Bay also has a vacancy at quarterbacks coach after Tom Clements retired.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Rural Mutual is the #1 farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
There's going to be no basketball for the Bucks today. They were scheduled to play at New Orleans tonight, but a winter storm there has led the NBA to postpone the game. A date for the makeup will be announced later, and it's an off day for the Badgers after falling to UCLA last night. They will host Nebraska coming up on Sunday. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, print.
Dane Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, talking about 2 guys that are up for Coach of the Year awards as the season ends here. And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
That's new Bears head coach Ben Johnson at his introductory press conference today. A little shot at the Packers. I don't know when he first said this, but our friend Bart Winkler had the take once upon a time, and he continues to bang the drum of this take, that's the kiss of death for any new Bears hire. A new coach, a new general manager. If you mention the Packers and the obsession with beating the Packers in the press conference, that's the kiss of death. Now, I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it's panned out that way because every coach and executive the Bears have hired for the last decade plus mostly have stunk. So it's like, it doesn't really matter what they say. They just hire bad coaches and bad executives. I don't know how Ben Johnson's going to be. I actually defended the Bears for 10 or 12 minutes yesterday because a lot of people on sports talk television and radio yesterday were like, oh, the Bears, first-time head coach, this will never work. It's like, well, what did you want him to do? Because if they would have hired McCarthy, y'all would have gave him crap for that. So I'll defend the Bears a little bit, but I had to take a little bit of a shot on Twitter today. It's like, oh, Ben Johnson mentioning the Bears, or mentioning the Packers, rather. Like, that's worked out really well for every other head coach and executive that's been hired in Chicago. I don't really want to dwell on that tonight. I have a couple things to say about the Packers. I don't really want to dwell on Ben Johnson becoming head coach of the Bears, but I think it's definitely the soundbite of the day. So that's why I put it in the intro. It's the Wisco Sports Show. My name is Grant Bills. I hope you're having an excellent Wednesday. This is a little impromptu Wisconsin Wednesday. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook or on Twitter, the live stream, the title of the stream is Wisconsin Wednesday, not just because the show takes place in Wisconsin, but specifically the University of Wisconsin. 2 Badgers guests tonight. Jesse Temple, now he's here every Wednesday because he joins our network once a week on all of our shows. He's on with Ebo on Monday. He does Bill tomorrow in the first hour at 10:45, and he normally chats with me on Wednesdays. So that's not out of the ordinary. We're also going to chat with Nick Osen, who I texted on Monday and said, hey, we haven't done a chat in a while. If you're willing to come on, I'd love to have you this week. And it just worked out where he was available on Wednesday. So it was not my intention to be like, hey, we're going to go University of Wisconsin on Wednesday. It's going to be a Wisconsin Wednesday. It just worked out that way. So let's lean into it, right? So we're going to talk with Jesse at 4:30. Nick Osen will be here, and we will be able to see his handsome face on the live stream as well. Always encourage you, if you're not listening on the radio and you're driving, or streaming on the Zone Madison app, which you should download. That's our flagship station. You can always watch on the live stream, YouTube and Facebook, the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills, and the show streams on Twitter as well, at Wisco Grant. I'm going to be efficient with my time, so we can still have time to tuck in your phone calls if you feel so inclined. I'll take some calls after this first break before we get to Jesse, if you're interested. 608-321-1670. And you can comment as well. I'll get to your text and your comments. I'll do my best to make sure we have plenty of time to hear from you if you have something to say today as well. I want to start with Badgers basketball last night because, God, that game pissed me off. Not because they lost. And I don't remember if I talked about this with Cone yesterday when he called in, one of our resident Badger basketball callers. It felt like maybe they were due. They had been in LA for a couple of days. UCLA is certainly better than USC, certainly better than Minnesota, and maybe Ohio State, although Ohio State beat Purdue. So you never know. College basketball can be a little bit of a crapshoot, but UCLA is, I think, certainly their highest quality opponent recently. And it felt like maybe they were due for a loss. They'd won 6, or I thought last night that it had been 6 in a row, but then I kept hearing 7 today. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not the one to ask. Numbers don't stick in my brain. They had won a bunch of games in a row, and it felt like maybe they were due. They were sloppy with the ball a little bit last night. 13 turnovers, I think they finished with. Greg Gard said in the postgame. Some of that was self-inflicted. Some of that is UCLA plays a really physical defense. Wisconsin hit a lot of threes. They scored in the 80s. It's tough to lose a game where you score in the 80s. What made me so upset about last night's game drove me up a wall. Like, I almost turned it off early. I was never going to turn it off early, but we threaten, like a dad on vacation. I'll turn this car around. My loser ass sitting on my couch. I'll turn this game off. No, I won't. I'm absolutely not going to turn it off, but I wanted to. I threatened to, at least in my own mind, because especially in the second half, these Big Ten refs just allow themselves to be taken for a ride. And I understand the more free throws, probably the better for Wisconsin because they're so good at shooting them and they're so effective at the line. They're the best free throw shooting team in the country. And while they might regress a little bit, I think this is a team that's just well equipped to take and make a lot of free throws. That's the way they're built. That's the way that they've kind of been formed. That's a real strength of theirs. So I'm no dummy. I understand the more free throws, the better for my team. But last night, watching this game, I transcended from my fandom to just a watcher of college basketball. Now, the broadcast was ticking me off as it was already. Not because it's on Peacock. I don't have a problem with Peacock. It was a bad watching experience because UCLA's gym, I don't know if it wasn't full. I don't know if it was where the mics were. You could hear the student section just every time the Badgers had the ball. And it was loud enough where you couldn't really hear the announcer. It was just a miserable watching experience. And then we got to see these two teams combined to shoot 50 free throws. That wasn't a basketball game, as I tweeted last night. That was a free throw shooting convention that they labeled a basketball game. And I know that benefits the Badgers, but it's not real basketball. When you have two teams going back and forth, free throws, not allowed to play real defense, not allowed to be physical on the boards. And when the referees establish the parameters for the whole first half, and then for the first 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 minutes of the second half, both teams are in the double bonus with like 7 minutes left. Of course, the players are going to lean into that, and they start getting away from playing actual basketball. They just start hunting contact, and it's a crummy product. And I hate watching teams take that many free throws. The refs do not do their job when they allow a game to get to that state. Half of UCLA's starting 5 was fouled out. Again, I know it benefits my team. That's how mature I'm being in this. Can't you see? I'm setting my fandom to the side for the greater good of the sport. Just a horrible product. And the most annoying thing is the one moment in the game, the Badgers were trying to give a foul because they had fouls to give at the end of the first half. The refs didn't give it to them until they gave Janicki the foul, and then they had to go all off and make it a flagrant or an intentional foul or whatever. So they give UCLA the free throws and the possession, and Greg Gard said after the game, and I agree with him, and maybe this is my fandom taking over, when Greg Gard said, look, the refs knew what we were trying to do. The refs should have known, because how often at the end of games do refs give fouls when fouls shouldn't be given? At the end of the Ohio State game, there was a foul that was called as the ball, I think it was going to Kamari McGee, or maybe it was Blackwell. The Ohio State defender didn't touch him. Not even close. But it was in such an obvious moment, an obvious spot of Ohio State trying to foul, the refs give. That's what referees normally do. They give fouls when they're obviously there to be given. The only time that the refs didn't give a foul last night was the moment where Wisconsin was obviously trying to give. So again, I'm not blaming the officials for anything. Wisconsin had opportunities to win that game. They didn't. But also, when you're down 5 with 3 minutes left, do you know how hard it is to get back into that game when you can't get a stop without fouling? Because every bit of contact is sending a guy to the stripe. If you're in double bonus, if both teams are in double bonus with 7 minutes left in the game, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Now, an ounce of actual basketball talk to get away from the refereeing. Greg Gard really must have wanted to take those 2 timeouts. Maybe he wanted to save them for the plane, for the flight home UCLA. I don't know. The Badgers were down 2 with an opportunity to take a 3 to win the game, which would have been the correct move. I'm just like, rip a 3, and if you make it, we win, great. And if not, just get out of there. John Blackwell's dribbling around aimlessly, and instead of holding for the final shot or shooting right away, which are my 2 preferred outcomes, you either got to rip it right away and take an obvious 2 if it's there, or hold for a 3. They did neither. John Blackwell waited for a contested 2, which is the opposite. I would have liked to see a timeout there. Whatever. Greg Gard explained that after the game. It's like, we had to play drawn up. John Blackwell was trying to make a play for his team. Whatever. At that point, I was so frustrated with the state of the game and the state of how it was officiated. I don't want to see 2 teams in double bonus with 7 minutes left. Call me old-fashioned. Maybe I prefer WIAC ball. Maybe I'm not cut out for the Big Ten level. I don't know. But that's just a miserable product. And we were all worse off for having watched it. The result was almost secondary to me last night because I had to sit there and listen to that Peacock broadcast and watch 2 teams take part in a free throw shooting convention that was labeled a basketball game. So the Greg Gard gauge, firmly affixed in the fire guard position for whatever that's worth. Last night was more about me just getting mad at the state of the game and the way that it was officiated. A Packers thought before our first break. I had an epiphany today. Okay. We keep circling back. We were doing this last week. Been doing it a couple times this week. Circling back to comments made by Matt LaFleur in his end-of-season presser and comments made by Brian Gutekunst in his end-of-season presser. We did that on Friday. Their commentary about the defensive line, and they end up letting Jason Rebrovich go. Makes sense. It was clear that both Goody and LaFleur expected more from that front, more than they got. So it makes sense that they would make a change of coach, right? Something that clicked today, and I don't even remember why it clicked. It was during Bill's show. We had all this talk from Matt LaFleur's presser about the details, right? I hammered this for like 2 hours last week. Well, in practice, we let it slip the details, running around at 15 yards instead of 20, right? Lacking detail, lacking focus, right? That stuff. Remember, that was the theme of Matt LaFleur's presser for me. I found you like 5 or 6 examples. We did that last week. I don't need to rehash that. It was driving me nuts. Okay. So that's been banging around in the back of my mind. And another thing that we've talked about on Bill's show and on this show, commentary that was uniform between LaFleur and Gutekunst. What does Jordan Love need to get better at? Both were asked. Well, how does he need to grow in year 3? And they didn't talk about his processing or his footwork or his fundamentals. What did they talk about? How he needs to become a better leader, a more vocal leader. This is Matt LaFleur, just to reiterate, when asked, hey, what can Jordan Love improve on from this year to next year? He talked about leadership. Here's that answer.
I think the next step is just to continue to evolve as a vocal leader. I think that just kind of comes with the position naturally. And I think he's taken steps to get there, but I think he can really demand a lot because the locker room, they respect him, not only as a person, but by the work he puts in. I mean, he's a grinder. I think that's one of his best qualities is he is one of the guys.
So this clicked in my brain today. Matt LaFleur saying Jordan Love needs to become more of a vocal leader, right? It clicked. I understand it now. This is Matt LaFleur saying, hey, I hammered these guys for 18 games about practice habits, about details, about execution, about the little things, right? Obviously to no avail because the same problems were present from week 1 against the Eagles all the way through to conveniently the wild card game against the Eagles, right? Really nice uniformity. There's some symbolism there, I think. But between 2 games against the Lions, 2 games against the Vikings, 2 games against the Eagles, it was the same problems throughout, right? And Matt LaFleur talked about it, the details, the little things, the execution throughout all the year. And it became very clear that whatever he was doing Monday through Friday was not landing. And I don't think Matt LaFleur is like, we need Jordan Love to become more of a leader because they want Jordan Love leading speeches in the locker room. I don't think that's it. I don't think they want Jordan Love to become more of a leader so he can charge out of the tunnel and get the boys fired up. I think Matt LaFleur and Gutekunst are hammering this leadership, this vocal leadership. I think Matt LaFleur is saying, hey, the message only gets so far coming from me. If my quarterback isn't getting up guys' butts about details and practice habits and preparation and focus, it's not going to land. I can only yell this so much. I can only bang on these guys so much, as evidenced by the entire season, right? Because from week 1 to the wild card, it was the same problems. It was the little things. It was, showing up and playing sloppy right off the bat. It was the self-inflicted wounds and the sloppiness and the lack of detail in the intermediate passing game. Matt LaFleur doesn't care about Jordan Love's post-game speeches. That's not what he's getting at. He's pleading to his guy, help me out. It only means so much coming from me. And what Jordan Love is going to have to realize, and I brought this up with Bill earlier, I thought this might have been my best take of the day. Not to pat myself on the back, but I mean, some take has got to be my best take of the day, but I think it's a good take. Jordan Love needs to realize I can be nice to these guys and I can be a teammate and I can be one of the boys. But at the end of the day, if Jaden Reed isn't paying attention to detail in his route, or if Dontavian Wicks isn't dialed in, or if the O-line isn't practicing hard, you know who it's going to reflect on? Me. Because I'm going to get blamed. I'm the guy making $55 million. I'm the guy who's supposed to be leading this offense. If Jaden Reed isn't paying attention to detail, or if this offensive line isn't practicing with good habits and good fundamentals and good attention to execution throughout the week, it's going to reflect on me. Because I'm gonna rip a pass and the guy's not going to be in the right spot. Or I'm going to do a 3-step drop and prepare to plant, but I'm going to have a guy in my lap. Or the play, even if it's successful, is going to come back because of, an illegal procedure or an illegal man downfield or a holding. I think Matt LaFleur is saying, hey, Jordan, I can bang on these guys for the details and practice habits until the cows come home. But it's not going to fully land unless you're there with me. And you know what? You might want to be these guys' friends, and you are. They're friend and teammate. But if you don't learn how to play the bad guy and the enforcer every once in a while, it's only going to end up reflecting poorly on you, right? Like a teacher. Teacher wants to be friends with the students, wants to be friendly. But you know what? If that teacher doesn't occasionally know how to instill some discipline and really speak the truth to their students, then the parents are going to come in, why are my kids' grades crummy? Why is he behind on his assignments? What's going on? It's going to reflect on the teacher, just like miscues in the offense are going to reflect on Jordan Love. So it clicked with me earlier today. These comments from LaFleur and Gutekunst about Jordan Love needing to become more of a leader. It's not, we need him leading speeches and we need him running out of the tunnel. It's, we need help getting an entire team of 53 people to lock in Monday through Friday. And if the quarterback isn't there enforcing that stuff and preaching that stuff along with the head coach, we're not going to get where we need to go. And that's easily and clearly evidenced over the course of this last season. 608-321-1670. Time for your calls on the Badgers, on the Packers, whatever. I'll take your calls right up until 4:30 when we get to Jesse Temple.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Mara had not played that kind of role before. How much did you prepare for him, and how much did he change the game?
Well, he changed the game because he made shots. And you can tell in the little bit of minutes he does get that he's pretty effective. And obviously at 7-3, you know, that's a big tree to try to go over around the rim. But his ability to get on the offensive glass, and then so he goes 8 for 11 from the free throw line, which he had not shot it at that way all the time. But you know, he's opportunistic, and the guards did a good job for them of finding him. When we get strung out at times, we get too elongated east and west with chasing ball screens, and he took advantage of what he had.
As Greg Gard after the game last night, I was more frustrated with the way the game was officiated. I think it probably benefited Wisconsin that there were 50 combined free throws. I'm not staying up until 10 o'clock to watch a game on Peacock that I can barely hear just to watch a free throw convention. I don't want to see two teams in double bonus with 7 minutes left. I'm sorry. The comment in there that sticks out to me, and I think it's a good reminder for the actual basketball game that was played, the Badgers lost 85-83 to stop a 7-game winning streak, I believe. When asked, hey, this Mara kid played the game of his life. What kind of impact did he have? 7'3", I believe, 7 foot 3 inches. And Greg Gard said, well, yeah, he made a big impact because he made shots. And I think that there's a beauty in that simple explanation of the game. UCLA hit a bunch of shots where you're like, what are you going to do? Just a floater or a fadeaway? Like, UCLA hit a bunch of good shots. Wisconsin's not a defensive juggernaut, and nobody was really allowed to play real defense last night with the way that fouls were getting called. But UCLA got a bunch of buckets where it's just like, there's not much you could do there. Wisconsin played really sloppy, lots of turnovers. They hit 50% of their threes and 50% of their shots from the field. UCLA, they didn't take nearly as many threes, but they hit 6 of them. They hit 50% of the shots of the field. They made a lot of tough buckets. So I know Mara, he's 7'3", and look at the sophomore. Yeah, a bunch of the guys just made a lot of shots. I'm not going to go so far as to say they pulled them out of their butt. I think that's unfair, and that comes across like salty fandom. I guess I still said it. I still kind of mean it. But if I were a journalist, that would not be not be the story that I write. Let's go to the phones. A couple minutes to take some calls before we get to Jesse Temple coming up here at 4:35. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? It was. What is it? The AVN Adult Video Network, or what's the convention or the award show you were at or nearby? I don't know that you attended. Sure. You did not go out there just for the porn show. It just happened to also be taking place. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want it done in like some Pixar studio. I don't want gangbang videos being done in the place that makes my children's movies. That seems wrong. No. Out. Out. I'm out. What sports take do you have? Did they cover? Not either. Nolan Winter he's done some great things this year. I'm really excited about him as a player, but he has some young moments still. There's still a ways to go. And Carter Gilmore, say what you want, he's limited, but he doesn't have a lot of those moments. He doesn't have any of those moments. Correct. Yes.
Need to hold on to Joe Barry's leftovers when you're changing the entire scheme. So now, if you go all the way back to Mike Pettin and when Rashawn Gary was drafted, right?
Mm-hmm.
You talk about it all the time. A young quarterback going through a million different head coaches and a million different coordinators is no way to succeed. Well, the Packers, with all of these young draft picks, specifically on the defensive line, they're changing the scheme or the coordinator or the position coach every single year under Matt LaFleur. And I don't understand why we didn't make the move last year. I don't understand why we held on to this guy if we already thought he was going to be a problem, right? If we thought, hey, we're going to put him on the chopping block, that's our scapegoat. Why wouldn't you get Lucas Van Ness with the guy you can work with over time? Because if you're going to invest first-round picks, that's what it takes. So that's my soapbox today as looking back.
Looking back, it's not a bad take. I think on some level, and you'd have to ask Packer people, they must have liked Rebrovich. They moved him from a different position. There must have been something that they really liked about him. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know. I talked about this with Andy because I did Pack-A-Day last night. I normally do it with him and Perry. Perry was under the weather this week, so Andy and I were just going duo last night. And he said, look, whether Rebrovich was the problem or not, whatever. Sometimes people get scapegoated in sports and in politics. I'm sorry. Well, that's unfair. I guess it's unfair then. I guess show business and politics, some industries just aren't fair. A lot of industries aren't fair. Maybe it was just step number one in Hafley's scheme with the switch on the front. We're going to stop the run. And we're going to focus on doing that really well. And they did. And then going into the offseason in year number 2, we're going to start to focus on the other things. It might just be a progression of the new scheme. Maybe they thought, Vagabond John, I have no inside information. I would guess that they liked Rebrovich and thought he would be good and then realized that he wasn't, which is a whoopsie. But I think typically the simplest explanation is probably the correct one. Sorry, I didn't have the phone feeding the live stream. Sorry, you couldn't hear Vagabond John talking about the porn shoot in Vegas, where he currently is for work, I believe. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
Great, it's Corey out of Marshall. I'll be real quick because I know you got to run for time here.
Sure.
Good afternoon, by the way.
Good afternoon.
So, question, on your opinion, you were talking about the refs and calling all those fouls last night.
Mm-hmm.
Is that more reminiscent of what it'll be called like in March, or is that more reminiscent of what we typically expect from a Big Ten game?
I think it's a crapshoot. I just think it depends on the night, depends on the crew, depends on how the game goes. I don't know that it's symbolizing anything in particular.
Because the reason I ask that is because in years past, Big Ten officiated games are generally pretty lackadaisical, actually, when it comes to fouls. So it's kind of odd from that to hear that they were real stringent about it last night. And then when you get to March, that's when the Badgers have really run into problems because they play typically a grittier defense, let's put it that way, and they get called for a lot of ticky-tack fouls. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I'll let you get going. Have a good one.
It's interesting, Corey. I don't know what to do big picture with the refs. It stands to reason. Well, when you get into the tournament, they let the kids play. Not always, though. Not always. I don't think the refs came in last night like, we're going to call a lot of fouls. It's just the way that the game progressed. You know what I mean? And once you start calling a lot of fouls, you can't move the goalpost, and then teams are in the double bonus, so they're going to try to draw contact even more, and it just spirals into a free throw shooting convention, which sucked to watch. One more call, and then we're going to get to Jesse Temple next. 608-321-1670. Who's this? The Flusher, who normally terrorizes the morning show, has now started calling Bill's show. which, look, as a massive sports radio listener myself, I do love the trick of trolling the host, but you're not, when you flush during Bill's show, it's just me on this phone, on the headset here, on the old rotary phone. I'm screening. It's not even going on the radio. So we might have time for one more. I saw someone trying to call in. I didn't get to him fast enough. Let's take this quick, and then we'll go to break. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Okay, you know what? Let's grow up on the phone. You never used a telephone before? First day of phone school? 5 minutes. We're going to talk with Jesse Temple, Badgers football. They met I almost said Jim. They met Jeff Grimes, new offensive coordinator. So we're going to get Jesse's accounting of that and what we can expect and what he talked about when he met with the media earlier this week. That's coming up next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
We went and recruited a couple of guys. Billy Edwards obviously is somebody that we're expecting big things from. He came here not long after I did, and so there's a natural connection there for he and I. That would be the case whether he were new or not. Building a trust and a relationship with your quarterback is certainly something that's important for me.
That's Jeff Grimes, next Badgers offensive coordinator, speaking with the media earlier this week. Jesse Temple was there. You're going to hear from him in just a sec. Nick Osen coming up next hour. Probably do a little more Badgers basketball talk with Nick. Probably do more football with Jesse. Jeff Grimes looks and sounds like a Wisconsin OC man. Looks like a dairy farmer from Cadott. So for that reason, I am in. And some of the X's and O's reasons, I'm also in. I think this seems like a better fit. We could then bitch and complain about why Longo was such a bad fit, but I guess what's done is done. You know, you can invest or not. Here's my conversation. Jesse Temple, as he joins us every Wednesday. Get back to taking your calls and chatting a little bit more after the segment. Here's Jesse. Jesse Temple is here. You can read his work at The Athletic, covers the Badgers, does an outstanding job. You also might hear him on the camp with Zach in the swing, talking Badgers football and basketball, our guy Zach Heilprin. So you guys got to speak with Jeff Grimes. His first availability was yesterday. I read today about the importance of a running quarterback. He was talking about that, and I just had a laugh at thinking about Phil Longo, thinking, yeah, same here, except my guy got hurt last year, so that much isn't changing. He likes the mobile quarterback, and I'm reading that his offense will be rooted in grit and toughness. What did you take away from your conversation with Jeff Grimes?
Well, my takeaway was a lot of his key talking points are things that are probably music to the ears of Badgers fans, and really, it felt like a lot of what made Wisconsin successful over the last few decades. The difference is it's going to be a change in philosophy and approach in terms of what the offense actually looks like. But this is exactly what Luke Fickell was looking for when he pursued a new offensive coordinator. Obviously, that's why he ended up hiring Grimes. They swung the pendulum so far in the other direction when they hired Phil Longo, and it was certainly a gamble because it was unlike anything Wisconsin had done. And obviously it failed because Longo got fired 23 games into his tenure. The offense wasn't good. It couldn't score points. It couldn't maintain time of possession. And it was like, well, if you're not going to be a quick strike offense and you can't control the game clock with sustained scoring drives, then what the hell are we doing here? So obviously they moved on from that. And Grimes is going to bring that toughness. And he wants a run-first approach, or at least an approach that is predicated on the run in the offensive line that allows you to open things up and do everything else out of play action. Now, we'll see whether it works at Wisconsin. Luke Fickell obviously can't be wrong with his offensive coordinator 2 straight times, but this certainly feels like the course correction that was needed at Wisconsin.
So a couple details from your story that I circled and that I wrote down, and I want to add to this conversation because people might be hearing this and thinking, okay, under center, extra offensive lineman, maybe, but historically, at least last year, that wasn't really the case. Longo was out of the shotgun 98% of the time. Grimes, 97 last year at Kansas. You had that stat from True Media. Now, one difference that Badgers fans might like, and you know, an actual schematic difference, it appears Jeff Grimes is going to use the tight end a lot more, right? There were a lot of 4 wide receiver, 1 running back sets with Phil Longo. That's not something that Jeff Grimes really did at Kansas at all. So could we see a little bit of a tight end renaissance this fall in Madison, at least what we, gotten used to last year?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to see multiple tight end sets quite frequently. And he still favors 11 personnel. 11 personnel is 3 receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. That's what Phil Longo also ran the majority of the time. The difference is about 40% of the snaps when Grimes was at Kansas and also in the 3 seasons previously at Baylor were out of 12 personnel, which is a 2 tight end set. And so they're going to be more physical. Obviously, just because you're in that set doesn't mean you can't pass the ball. But I think that's why adding a guy like Tanner Koziel out of the transfer portal from Ball State is such a big deal. He was one of the most highly rated transfer portal tight ends available. He caught 94 passes last year. I think you're going to see him and Tucker Ashcraft and perhaps a couple other tight ends quite a bit. So there are different ways to get to the plan, obviously, but it is all about establishing that physicality. And we'll see again whether Wisconsin can actually do it on the field. You can win the interview, but I think one thing that's notable about Grimes is, he's not going to make all these promises at this point. And in fact, he says everyone's excited about the direction, but he also said right now it's just talk. I'm in a honeymoon phase and I haven't called any bad plays yet, and we haven't lost any games. So he knows what's on the line here.
One more detail from your story that everyone should go read is he said he doesn't want to watch any film, or he's not going to watch a ton of film of last year because he wants everybody to earn their spot. He wants to come in with kind of a blank slate of the players who are here and how good they can be or how much they can be used. Did you find that interesting, or did that jump out to you? Because I thought at first, I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. But then I thought about it. Okay, it makes sense.
I think a lot of coaches who come in new actually do that because they want to develop their own understanding of the players they have. Now, that's not to say Grimes is not fully aware of who played.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he knows there are 3 starters returning on the offensive line. Vinny Anthony was pretty good last year. But there's a difference between that and let me break down every play and let me base my understanding of what that player's potential is for me on what they did in a Phil Longo offense that is completely different from what I'm going to run. He's still trying to get to know them. There's meetings, there's off-season conditioning, and of course, spring practice is about 2 months away. It's going to start in mid-March, and that's when he's really going to get a sense of the guys. But that's probably the best philosophy and approach that you can take when you come in new, to try to get a sense of what it's going to be like for these guys.
Yeah, you want to have a good enough baseline understanding of what you're walking into, but be able to create new judgments and have a blank slate to kind of build moving forward. So that makes sense. There's a balance certainly that needs to be struck. A housekeeping note on football. I don't really know what to do with this. I probably wouldn't even ask you about this, Jesse, had the Big Ten in Wisconsin not put out actual concrete statements about the Xavier Lucas situation. He posted some video in Miami gear last night. I saw you retweeted it. You don't need to get into any legal details if you don't want. What do we need to understand here? What's the easy boilerplate bullet points of what's progressing between the Big Ten, Wisconsin, and Miami?
Well, I'll get into it because I wrote about it, but there are no rules. We don't know what the rules are. Maybe those are the overarching topics here. Obviously, Wisconsin had remained silent for the entire time since Xavier announced in early December, that he planned to enter the portal, and then went back and said Wisconsin was preventing him from talking to schools because they wouldn't put him in the portal. We've heard plenty from Xavier Lucas's representation, but what Wisconsin said is they alleged that Miami's football program had what Wisconsin called impermissible contact with Xavier because you're not supposed to be able to talk to somebody if you're not in the portal. And obviously Xavier is currently enrolled at Miami and plans to play there. And of course, Wisconsin also said that he signed a couple of agreements related to NIL. One was a 2-year deal as part of what the revenue sharing plan is going to be under the NCAA House settlement. And I don't want to get into all the mumbo jumbo because it might make the listeners fall asleep, but it's so interesting and fascinating because the revenue share aspect isn't official, hasn't even gone into effect, still needs to be voted on. And so he did sign something about that, but it's not in place. And then the other thing that he signed, according to Wisconsin, was an agreement with the Varsity Collective. Now, I don't know exactly what the numbers were and all that, but Wisconsin is basically saying, hey, players expect Wisconsin to honor these agreements, and we expect the players to honor these agreements. And obviously they're claiming that Miami, had tampering. So on the other hand, Xavier just straight up withdrew from Wisconsin and enrolled at Miami outside the transfer portal windows, basically saying, transfer portal windows don't matter.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's next for this, but man, it's been quite a headache.
And it's interesting to follow. I don't envy you. And I've talked with Zach about this too. Zach's like, I'll ask him about this. He's like, look, I don't mean to be short. I just don't like legal stuff in sports. This isn't why I cover sports. This isn't why I'm interested in it. This, however, is, I don't want to say landmark. Maybe that's heavy-handed, but this is very significant in maybe shaping what could come to pass for the future of college football. I do find it interesting, right? If this is a matter of tampering, did Miami tamper that bad? Like, what separates this from all of the other tampering that we all know goes on some level, right, Jesse?
Yeah, that's a key question here because I'll just be honest, Grant. I've talked to a lot of people. It's what I do for my job, right?
Yeah.
People involved in the program, and I know of multiple players who were on the team last year, people who will be on the team this year that had schools offering them X amount of money, and they weren't in the portal necessarily. So how's that happen?
Yeah.
Because there's so-called tampering going on, and whether it's directly with the assistant coach of that school or whether it's a third party, whatever it may be, it obviously goes on. Now, this situation, for whatever reason, is different, and obviously it has to do in large part, maybe entirely, with that he signed what Wisconsin said was a binding 2-year agreement on December 2nd. All the returning players came back and were presented with these contracts as soon as the regular season ended so that the Badgers could know what their roster was going to look like and offer them a certain amount of money. And then he goes home and is just piecing out. And I think really what we're dealing with right now is Wisconsin. I compare it to a poker hand where you're just kind of pot committed by the time you get to the last card.
Sure.
They are carrying the water here for the Big Ten, for the NCAA, and it's beyond what it means for Wisconsin. It's just what it means for the landscape of college athletics as it's related to NIL and contracts, and it is messy and confusing and complicated, and this is not the last that we'll hear about it, I'm sure.
It's interesting to follow. Like I said, I'm glad that I'm not responsible for the dirtiest of details in all of this, but we look forward to your reporting. Another football thing, and maybe we can wrap up with a basketball question. Luke Fickell was down in New Mexico to watch Mason Posa wrestle. Can you tell us, and you've probably written about this in the past, but it's been so long since I've thought about this guy. Tell us a little bit about that relationship and why these two parties are so drawn to each other, because I had some listeners or followers on Twitter pointing out like, hey, there's a huge quarterback camp going up in Eau Claire with some of, so many of Wisconsin's quarterbacks, and yet Luke Fickell is down in New Mexico. So I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I guess I want to reiterate or rediscuss that relationship and that pairing between Fickell and Posa. Tell us about that.
I mean, Mason Posa is an awesome high school football player, so that's where it starts. I look at his film and I think, I compare him, I've talked about this with Zach on the camp, I compare it to like Leo Chanel, Nick Herbig, when you watch their high school film and go, holy crap.
Sure.
And I realize that, putting a lot on a guy who's not even here yet, but I just mean, you see it and you think there's legitimate potential here to be a dominant player at Wisconsin and be an NFL player. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen for Mason, but there's a lot of excitement within the program about being able to land him because Wisconsin doesn't go to New Mexico and get football players ever. And they were able to beat out Oregon and Texas A&M, who were among his finalists. And certainly there's the wrestling aspect. Everybody knows Luke Fickell's wrestling story, the greatest wrestler in Ohio State history. And Mason Posa is a 3-time state wrestling champion in New Mexico. And one of the reasons he is not among the 15 or 16 early enrollees that Wisconsin has right now in the 2025 recruiting class is he's got a 4 state championship to try and win in wrestling. And so Luke is obviously all for that. They've got a good connection there. But yeah, I think he's got a chance to be a great one for the Badgers.
All right. Well, that's an interesting player. I'm excited to get him up here. New Mexico, and obviously the wrestling connection is obvious. Let's talk basketball for 60 seconds. It felt like maybe they were kind of due. They played a little bit last night like they had been in LA for a couple of days, and they were trying to extend a winning streak. The turnovers were messy. I'm not going to lie, Jesse. I had a real problem watching last night's game just because I hate when games turn into free throw parades. I know that I think that benefits the Badgers because they're so good at shooting free throws. But I was just happy when last night's game was done and I could go to bed. Tell me about some of the things that you noticed over that winning streak that give you a lot of excitement for the rest of the season, and maybe a thing or two, and maybe it caught up with them last night that said, yeah, they won 6-7 games in a row, but they're going to have to continue to attack and work on this to make sure that success sustains through the rest of the season.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to bemoan a 2-point loss on the road to UCLA on this West Coast swing where you already had to play USC and you won 7 games before that in a row. You're not going to go undefeated or win for 2 straight months in a league like the Big Ten. I think the 7-game winning streak certainly was encouraging because it was coming off a 3-game losing streak. Wisconsin was 0-2 in Big Ten play. Now they're at a point where they're 5-3, reaching about the halfway point, and they're in really good position to potentially improve their NCAA tournament seeding. What stands out to me is the quality of play they get from the starters, and then the couple guys that they have coming off the bench giving them an awful lot, especially Kamari McGee. Can't say enough about what he's been able to do this year. Obviously stepped in for Max Klesman when Max was hurt and Kamari got his first start and played 33 minutes a week or two ago. But they've got a lot of good pieces, and that's why this team has all 5 starters averaging double figures in scoring. That's why the team has a chance to be special when it gets to the NCAA tournament.
Anything that we can look forward to either on the camp or the swing with you and Zach, or anything at the Athletic we should watch for in the next week?
Well, Zach and I will certainly be breaking down later this week the conversations with all the new assistant coaches. Jeff Grimes was one of 4 in new positions that we had a chance to talk to this week. And yeah, I'll have coverage on certainly plenty more from the football program and basketball stuff coming up too, since we're about that time of the year. So check it all out at the Athletic.
Yeah, we're going to start getting to the Saturday, Sunday matinees on networks. And, once football's done, I love that time of year. So we'll look forward to it. Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Grant. Talk soon.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
I mean, it was real physical, which we knew it was going to be. We knew that it was going to be that type of game. Specifically, UCLA plays like a Big Ten team. Even though they're new to the league, they've always played like a team in our league, and we knew it was going to be that, and we had to play through it.
Welcome back. First day of microphone school at UCLA. Greg Gard there last night after the Badgers loss. Felt like they were due, but it was just an abhorrent product. Just heinous. 50 combined free throws. Both teams in double bonus with like 7 minutes left. It just shouldn't happen. It can't happen. It drives me nuts when it happens. I know it benefits my team. I know it benefits the Badgers when that happens because they're a really good free throw shooting team. Doesn't mean I want to watch it. I don't want to watch it, and it's unnatural. If half of a team's starting five is fouled out in the final 3 minutes, something went wrong. You know what I mean? Something went awry. You know what I mean? It can't be like, oh, weird game. No. There were too many fouls called. You have to find a way to not call that many fouls and put teams at the free throw line that much. I've been neglecting the text line, so I will do my best now to make up for that. 608-321-1670. This text says, I turned the game off under the 4-minute timeout. It was already too late, and I knew the last 4 minutes was going to take forever with the ref show. You were correct. This one came in at 3:40, and I don't really know. This is before the show started. I don't know what this is referencing. Maybe you guys can help me out with this. This is from the name is saved as Stout 82 guy, a Blue Devil from the early 80s. I would guess. That would be how I read this name. Grant, nice topic about fundraising at the Wisconsin program. Oh, listening to yesterday's show, 121 show. A gal not many people know is the gal that started Epic headquarters in Verona, Wisconsin. She's a UW-Madison grad, signed 82 Stout guy. Okay, so you were listening to yesterday's show, texting in, which I love. You can text anytime. Yeah, look, I'm not the person who's most educated on such things. I don't see why Wisconsin should be way behind Nebraska or way behind Penn State. Ohio State, Michigan, I get it. It's fine. I'm not an idiot. Those schools, those fan bases. Man, have you ever met someone who went to Michigan? If you're like, no, I don't think so, you'd know because they'd tell you. Same with Michigan State. Anyone who went to any of the mission schools, they're a very proud state. Very proud of their education. I'm actually going to Michigan this weekend, by the way. The Upper Peninsula, not downstate, as they say in the UP. By the way, I'll be off on Friday. Apologies in advance. I've already recorded a couple of interviews to run ahead of time, including a commander's guest who might be familiar to some of you if you at any point listened to WSSP in Milwaukee, Toby Altizer, who used to do Milwaukee radio and then moved home to his native DMV, which is, what does that stand for? I'm thinking DC, Maryland, Virginia. I guess that makes sense. It was like Delaware. That doesn't make any sense. So we're going to preview Washington and Philly with him. Really good interview. I recorded with them earlier today. I'm going to be off on Friday because I'm going to Marquette on Thursday night for a little extended weekend in the UP. I haven't been to Marquette in a while. Speaking of Michigan, the UP people are not as pretentious, but the people, my God, who go to Michigan or Michigan State, they just care about it, but they do. They're prouder. And maybe that reflects poorly on UW-Madison grads. I don't know. It's not my problem. I'm not one of them. I'm a UW lacrosse grad, okay? But I really don't think there should be a huge gap in fundraising between Wisconsin, Nebraska, Penn State. Maybe Nebraska people, Vagabond John was texting me about this, or maybe it was RJ from the morning show, who's like, yeah, you'd be surprised. Nebraska people, they care a lot. There's not much else. And in Madison, I guess there is other things. So if you're trying to get Epic to pony up and pay for a quarterback, like, I don't know that would work the same way. Maybe that it would work in Lincoln or maybe at Penn State. I don't know. My point yesterday and what Stout Guy is referencing, I don't see why Wisconsin should be that far behind in fundraising some of their Big Ten counterparts. They're not going to match Phil Knight. They're not going to match Ohio State, or they're not going to match Michigan because those obnoxious people just wouldn't allow it to happen. But I think they can do a better job than they have done. And Vagabond John's banged that drum before. You know what I mean? He talked about the organization, the presentation, and the marketing of their collective and their NIL fund. I get it. Right? I don't know that it's the most organized in the world. It's also just not like top of mind for me, like it is for Vagabond John. And that's why calls are great. I'll take more of your calls next. And I'll reset the show with a Packers take that I made at 4:00. If you've joined us since, we'll get to that in just a couple of minutes as well. A 2-minute update from Zach Heilprin, all the latest. And Nick Osen, still to join us at 5:30. He's going to join us to talk Badgers basketball. Nick is just a ray of light, just a real beam of sun. And I look forward to chatting with him, probably mostly about basketball, but maybe working some football talking points and pick his brain maybe on the national championship if he has anything to say about that, which took place earlier this week, obviously topical as well. 608-321-1670. More of your calls, I promise, right after this update from Zach Heilprin.
This is a Wisconsin Sports Zone update.
Well, the Packers are continuing to put in work filling some vacancies on their coaching staff. The one where most of the reported interviews have taken place is along the defensive line. They'd already interviewed Jets defensive line coach Aaron Whitecotton and Buccaneers defensive line coach Casey Rogers. They have since also added former Bears defensive coordinator Eric Washington to the list of interviewees. Green Bay also must replace QB coach Tom Clements, who retired. That hire could come from within the organization. Turning to the Badgers, they introduced new offensive coordinator Jeff Grimes yesterday. Comes from Kansas, but also has coordinator experience at Baylor and BYU. Wisconsin going to be adjusting the offense from the air raid that former coordinator Phil Longo installed to a more power run game style that fans are used to.
You know, I believe when you can run the football, then you can do anything. If you can't run the football, then it limits your ability to do a number of other things. But if you have the ability to run the football and run it effectively week in, week out, then it puts enough pressure on the defense that it allows you to do a lot of other things. And
Wisconsin returned for winter workouts this week. That included more than half of their incoming freshman class.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Rural Mutual is the #1 farm insurer in Wisconsin for a good reason. As a company founded by farmers, they understand the ag industry and its challenges. Local agents offer farm families the best advice and personalized coverage. Visit ruralmutual.com to find an agent near you.
Rural Mutual Insurance, keeping Wisconsin strong.
Well, the Bucks are in New Orleans. It's where they're going to take on the Pelicans tonight. Milwaukee reached the midway point of the season with a 24-17 record, sitting fourth place in the Eastern Conference. Tip tonight is at 7. And Wisconsin back home after seeing their 7-game winning streak snapped at UCLA last night. We'll be back in action on Sunday when Nebraska visits the Kohl Center. With this Wisconsin Sports Zone Network update, I'm Zach Heil, Print.
Dane Campbell, Kevin O'Connell. Talk about two guys that are up for Coach of the Year awards as the season ends here. And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
This is where Wisconsin gathers to talk sports. Packers, Brewers, Badgers, Bucks. The Wisco Sports Show is on the air. Now, here's your host, Grant Bills.
Hour number 2, I have a Packers take that I want to reiterate that I shared with you all the way back at 4 o'clock. So if you've been listening since then, I guess congratulations for toughing it out for a full hour now so far. A lot of good stuff yet to come. Nick Osen going to join us at 5:30 to talk Badgers. Probably mostly basketball. We'll do a little football too, whatever else is banging around in Nick's brain. I might just ask him, hey, what are you working on? What do you want to talk about? I want to make sure we get to that, even though most of it's going to be Badgers hoops, especially after their winning streak came to an end last night. So he's coming up in about a half hour. Wide open phone lines if you have anything to say. You won't have to wait very long. 608-321-1670. But to reiterate this Packers thing that I shared with you at the beginning of the show, this came up on Bill's show earlier today. We've been circling back, kind of reiterating and picking at comments made by Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst. Both did very long, reflective, big picture press conferences last week, right? State of the season, state of the team, ideology moving forward, that kind of thing. And Matt LaFleur talked about the lack of attention to details. And, in this game, it was about practice habits. It was about, starting fast and coming ready to play. All these little things that were so obviously lacking throughout the course of the year, right? The proof is in the pudding in this season. They lost to the Eagles, very similar to the way that they lost to the Vikings, very similar to the way they lost to the Lions. And they lost to all of those teams twice each. Look like Richard Nixon with twice each. Okay, we should probably be careful with the presidential gestures or gestures by those close to presidential figures. That's not the point. The point, they lost to all of these teams twice, spread throughout the season. Okay, so we have this 18-week, 18 game, when you factor the 17 regular season games and the wildcard game, you have 18 games of evidence that this team couldn't clean up the self-inflicted wounds, couldn't clean up the penalties, couldn't clean up the hammer-headed personal fouls and gaffes on special teams, the lack of attention to detail in the passing game. It was an issue throughout, and Matt LaFleur talked about that 6 ways till Sunday in his presser last week, right? That was my biggest takeaway from that presser. Now, another thing that Matt LaFleur said, and I'm trying to connect the dots, right? How is one thing related to another? How is this related to that? One thing that Matt LaFleur talked about, and Gutekunst talked about this too, but honestly, Goody's press conference is like 35 minutes long, and I tried to find this comment before the show. Just take my word for it. Goody talked about this too. Okay, I don't have the audio. I apologize. Matt LaFleur, when asked about the next step in Jordan Love's development or progression as a starting quarterback from year 2 to year 3.
I think the next step is just to continue to evolve as a vocal leader. I think that just kind of comes with the position naturally. And I think he's taken steps to get there, but I think he can really demand a lot because the locker room, they respect him, not only as a person, but by the work he puts in. I mean, he's a grinder. I think that's one of his best qualities is he is one of the guys.
So when I heard that, I said, Matt, Jordan's fundamentals were lacking this year. His scrambling ability and diagnosing ability on when to tuck and run both need to get better. I know he was hurt this year. It's still true, and it's true all the way going back to college. He just didn't scramble very often. The intermediate passing game was sloppy, and he turned the ball over too much. And now you're telling me, hey, what does Jordan Love need to get better at in year 3? And you're like, leadership. Like, come on, sure. Obviously, Matt, like I want him to continue to grow as a leader. I'm talking about the football stuff, man. You're talking about him like he had a perfect season actually playing quarterback, and he didn't. He had far from it. Year 1 of being paid, year 2 as a starter. So that answer kind of piqued me. And then earlier today, I get it now. I understand. I had an epiphany. Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst are not banging the drum on Jordan Love's leadership so he can give good locker room speeches and so he can lead the charge out of the tunnel. That's not it. That's not it. Matt LaFleur needs help. He needs some reinforcements, right? When mom is trying to get the kids to sit down and eat dinner, occasionally she needs the father to intervene and be on her side, united front, to corral the little rascals to sit down and eat their fish sticks or whatever. You know what I mean? We've all been familiar with that maybe in your home life with your family, or we've certainly seen that trope presented in movies. I think of The Incredibles when Dash and Violet are fighting and the mother, Helen, is like trying to get control over it. And Mr. Incredible, the dad, is reading a newspaper or sitting at the end just in silence. And she's like, Bob, I need you to intervene. I need help. And then he picks up the table. I'm intervening. Very classic scene. Very good, excellent movie. Classic, I would say, right? Matt LaFleur is the parent, and he's struggling with all the little bastards, with their practice habits, with their attention to detail, with their discernment, let's call it, on late hits and on taunting and unnecessary roughness penalties, those kinds of things, right? Matt LaFleur is trying. He's banging these guys in the side of the skull all year long. We need to be better at this. We need to be better at that. We need to make improvements here. And it never got any better. And I think Matt LaFleur talking about how Jordan Love needs to become a better leader, that has nothing to do with locker room speeches or he's like, I need my quarterback to help me get these guys dialed in because it's going to carry a lot of weight. I can scream at them until I'm blue in the face. And then they can all go into the locker and be like, geez, bitchy much, Matt? Like, God, can you believe that guy out there today? Where does he get off? You know, we're 7-2 or whatever. But when Matt LaFleur is preaching it, and then Jordan Love is preaching it, and he's getting up the butt of Jaden Reed or Romeo Dobbs or the offensive line, it carries a lot more weight. And what I think Jordan Love has to realize, as much as he is the contemporary of Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, he started the same year all of these guys started. They're such a similar age. So it would be awkward for Jordan Love to be like, hey, listen up. You know, it maybe doesn't feel natural to him right away. But it's got to start to feel natural. Because at the end of the day, if Jaden Reed runs a sloppy route, you know who that's going to reflect on? Jordan Love. Because us sitting at home, we're thinking, Jordan, why was it such a bad throw? Was it, or was it a bad route? You know what I mean? Why is that ball intercepted? What is he seeing there? Well, if Dontavian Wicks ran a route at 15 yards instead of 20, again, it reflects on Jordan Love. So Jordan Love's got to figure out, and this, by the way, applies to coaching too, with players' coaches. Coaches don't want to be mean to players. Coaches want to be liked by players. They want to be one of the guys. That's great, but those guys will get you fired. They are not your friend. They are playing for you, trying to win games and trying to get their next contract. So you can be friends with them all you want. That's not going to help you save your job when the team stinks because it's your butt that's going to be on the line. And the same with Jordan Love. right? So when Matt LaFleur says stuff like this,
I think the next step is just to continue to evolve as a vocal leader. I think that just kind of comes with the position naturally. And I think he's taken steps to get there, but I think he can really demand a lot because the locker room, they respect him, not only as a person, but by the work he puts in. I mean, he's a grinder. I think that's one of his best qualities is he is one of the guys.
the message means more coming from Love. I shouldn't say it means more. It will help supplement the messaging and the leadership of Matt LaFleur. You know what I mean? Matt LaFleur is trying week after week after week. Guys, we got to get this cleaned up. We got to get this fixed. We got to pay attention to this. And I'm sure the players are like 60% responsive. Like they're listening. I don't think Matt LaFleur's getting blown off by his team. But if Jordan Love is getting up these guys' butts, think of Brady, right? And Belichick. Belichick could scream and be a prick to these players day after day after day. But all these players are going to be like, oh, this old man, this old fart. But if Brady comes in the room, he's like, what was that? Excuse me? You were saying? You know, that's the element that Jordan Love needs to add into this equation with his leadership. It has nothing to do with locker room pump-up speeches and, you know, running out of the tunnel. That's not what it is. Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst, I think, in their wishes and in their calls for Jordan Love to grow more as a vocal leader, it's a call for help. It's like, hey, we need enforcements because obviously me alone, it's not enough. Just look at the evidence. Look at the pudding. The proof is there. They lost to the three teams above them in the standings twice apiece. You know how damning that is? I brought this up last week, 2 weeks ago. You know, it would have been last week. Would have been early last week. It's like, do you know how glaring and how obvious it is to lose to the Eagles twice, the Vikings twice, the Lions twice? You get a second crack at all those teams to implement new coaching ideas, to preach different messages, to make adjustments. It's such a flop of coaching to go over in all of those rematches. And I think when Matt LaFleur and Goody and these guys, when they start to say, yeah, we need Jordan Love to be more of a leader, I think it's more, we need help. We need an extra voice in here because what we're doing obviously isn't enough. It needs to come, the call needs to come from inside the house as well. And I think that falls on Jordan Love. Does that make sense? I think this was an important epiphany that I had today. 608-321-1670 if you would like to add on to this or share any Badgers basketball or Badgers football takes. I will take your calls now. Let's go to line number one. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this?
This is Louie in Eau Claire.
What's going on, Louie?
Hey, you know, talking about kind of needing more leadership out of Jordan Love and that.
Yeah.
Isn't that a conversation you have when you're signing him to a $55 million a year contract? Hey, Jordan, you know, we're investing in you heavily.
Mm-hmm.
We're not looking for you to just take snaps under center and pass the ball. When we're giving you this money, we're paying you to be the face of our team, and that means more than just being the quarterback. You need to be somebody who is not afraid to hold people accountable. We're paying you to be on the same page as your wide receivers. We can't be the only ones kind of, you know, leading this team. This money is more than just that. Do you think that conversation was had at the contract signing or in the negotiations? Because if it was strictly fiscal, that seems like malpractice to me. What do you think?
Well, I think it's definitely, those conversations are had. I also think that can only happen with time. You know what I mean? I don't think it's necessarily, well, I make $50 million now, so I'm going to scream and yell at you. I think that happens. And hopefully he doesn't have to scream and yell hardly ever. You know what I mean? It's more of an understood, it's more of a spoken thing among teammates. If he's got to get on his teammate's case for something, I think it happens with time. And by the way, this is Matt LaFleur responding to a question. It's not Matt LaFleur saying, hey, right off the jump, we had a great season. I think one of our biggest problems was that Jordan Love wasn't a vocal leader. I don't know that this is a pressing issue. This is Matt LaFleur answering a question. And I think that matters, right? He didn't bring this up unprompted. He, you know, brought this up as a talking point on a way that Jordan Love can grow. So I don't know that the situation is dire. I just don't know that I really fully grasped it and understood it today. Does that make sense, Louis?
I get it to an extent, yeah. To bring it up, though, I think he kind of sounded like he expected more. And I get what you're saying about kind of coming in time, but he may only be his second year starting. but it was his 5th year in the building. I think him and Elton Jenkins are probably the most kind of veteran players on offense. So I think people are looking to him to be kind of the person who, I'm not talking about being a jerk, but being accountable and saying, hey guys, get this offense going. Whatever that takes, that means we're spending extra time in the building. We got to stay extra and do this. I know I've been injured. That hasn't helped. We have to make up for that chemistry one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. Love has been in the building longer than he's been starting. I also think leadership can't be fake. You know what I mean? Especially in a locker room of grown men who've been playing the sport their whole life, who make money, who are professionals. Like the guy who stands up to speak in the locker room, everyone can spot a phony. And I think Jordan Love, especially when all these guys are his age, it's not like everyone's younger than him. They're contemporaries, right? So for him to stand up first year starting last year and start getting up in guys' grills, I don't know that that's necessarily organic. I also don't want this to be, interpreted as though it's been this huge problem. I don't think it's been a problem. And I am not removing blame from Matt LaFleur's plate. I'm not saying, well, what did you want LaFleur to do this year? His quarterback wasn't helping him out. Like, I think LaFleur had a bad year as a head coach, especially towards the end. I thought his scheme did not, how do I want to put this? I thought there were opportunities to do certain things they didn't do, and they did some things that I don't really know was their benefit. I don't think his scheme was dialed in with the strengths and the weaknesses of what his offense was. And I thought he was a poor game manager on top of it this year. And typically he's been pretty good at that throughout the course of his career. So I don't think Matt LaFleur had a good year. But I think Matt LaFleur is saying, look, moving forward, it's a lot easier to stay dialed and to stay focused when the quarterback is vocal and the quarterback's banging that drum as well. I don't know that it's been a problem up until this point. Jay Krebs says on Twitter, this is a good point. On offense, especially Love will be the reason players get a second contract. They damn well better listen or do to what they are asked to do. That's another thing. If Wicks or Jaden Reed especially want a second contract in Green Bay, running 15-yard routes on a 20-yard play call, that's not going to fly. It's just not going to fly. It ultimately reflects on Love, though. That's my thing, is Love needs to put the gas pedal down a little bit on some of these guys if details aren't being addressed, if practice habits aren't good, because those mistakes are going to end up hurting Love. He's going to wear the brunt of it. And the sooner that Love realizes that, the better. The sooner that he starts to, I think, become a more vocal leader, to Matt LaFleur's point, the better. Let's take a break. 3 minutes. More of your phone calls. We got time. We'll have about 10 minutes before we get to Nick Osen and talk more Badgers basketball, Badgers football. That's all coming up next on the Wisco Sports Show.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
It's the Wisco Sports Show. Nick Osen, about 10 minutes away. 24/7 Sports, CBS is going to join us to talk Badgers. A little bit of a Wisconsin Wednesday. Jesse Temple in the 4 o'clock hour, Nick Osen in the 5 o'clock hour. I didn't really plan it this way. It just kind of worked out. I don't really plan anything with that much intent. I texted Nick, I think on Sunday, and was like, hey, man, it's been a while since we've done something. Let's talk some Badgers hoops this week. He's like, Wednesday? Like, sure. So it just worked out. 608-321-1670 if you would like to join, if you have a Packers take, if you have a Badgers take. Would love to have you. My real only Packers take of the day is circling back to something that Matt LaFleur said last week that finally clicked, where when he talks about Jordan Love wanting to be a better leader, I'm like, oh, it's not about locker room speeches. It's not about leading the team out of the tunnel. It's about Matt LaFleur having a little bit of an ally in the locker room and a leader, a call coming from inside the house, if you will, on paying attention to detail and practicing Monday through Friday, the things that were so obviously lacking, right? Grain Man Mike says, Grant, no Bucks game tonight because New Orleans got a foot of snow yesterday and it's only 30 degrees today. I'm booking a flight to get down to that nice weather. I'm very glad that this weather is hitting now and not while I'm there with Bill for the Super Bowl. That would be a bummer. It was kind of chilly when we were in Vegas last year, which is whatever. It's still warmer than here, but I want a little warmth. I want to be able to wear a button-up shirt, a big button-up shirt, and go out on Bourbon Street. Get some beignets. I don't know, whatever New Orleans fare. Sam Brookhouse is from down there. He's from St. Charles, Louisiana, our friend from Sumer Sports. So he's going to be on Monday, I believe, with me, Monday evening, live from Radio Row. And I'm going to tell him, help me make a list. Like, what do I need to eat? I'm here. He says, all everyone talks about in New Orleans is the food. I want to go to Cafe Du Monde, not because it is touristy. I want to go to Cafe Du Monde because Jimmy Buffett mentions it in a song. And if Big Ron is listening, he will know exactly what song I'm referencing because I believe it's his favorite. So I want to go there and just for the song, really. Josh in Cornell says, I like the take. I wonder if it was maybe harder for Jordan to be a strong leader and to take his teammates to task this year when he was either not on the field or not playing as well as he's accustomed to. That's true, too. Yeah. When he's not practicing. I think the injuries limiting his mobility played a huge role this year. And I also think his disrupted practice schedule. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's so underdiscussed. I'm not using those things as excuses to minimize his poor play. I'm just saying those are definitely big storylines from this year, especially not practicing. Those reps, those things that are worked on Monday through Friday. There's plenty of people who believe the battle is won or lost before the battle even begins. So if we're applying that to the NFL, practice is pretty darn important. Appreciate the text, Josh. Grandman Mike, another follow-up. Says, Grant, you struck something in my head about LaFleur that I've been bitching about for the last 10 years with our high school football team. Which high school? I want to know, Grandman. Somewhere in Madison? They have a scheme and they will only run that scheme. Well, maybe you don't want to put them on blast. I hope that it doesn't turn to that, but I've watched it for 10 years when a coach wins early in their career and then the last 8 are a dumpster fire. The good coaches coach what they have. The best coaches win with what they have. The rest are on the hot seat or fired Black Monday. Can't wait for spring training so we don't have to talk about this no more. Love you. Love the show. Go, miss you, Euchre. Yeah, I'm excited for spring training. I'm excited to talk some baseball. I mean, CC Sabathia was elected to the Hall of Fame. That's cool. And he's a legendary Brewer. I haven't really brought it up much because I don't really have anything extended or anything in depth to say about it. It's cool. Congratulations to CC Sabathia. Ichiro in that class as well. Ryan Braun headlining next year's class. I think his numbers are borderline anyways. certainly not getting in with the steroids, although I would like for the Brewers to honor him as many ways as possible. And I've talked about that plenty. We don't need to continue to talk about that. But yes, I am very excited. Grain Man, when we're at the Super Bowl, I'm going to play this little game because we'll be there Monday through Friday. I'm going to play this little game. I'm going to try to find as many ways to talk Brewers baseball from the Super Bowl as possible. And I have one or two already, and I'm thinking of some guests that are coming on, and I'm trying to find angles. I just want to play a game, and I'm going to make check marks on a piece of paper every time I'm able to bring up the Brewers or reference the Brewers from the Super Bowl. I remember last year we were talking about Rick Schlesinger's new parking technology, and I found a lot of humor in that. Some of you probably thought it was stupid. That's fine. But I thought there was a lot of humor in, hey, we're live at the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, NFL's Radio Row. Did you see what the Brewers announced with their new parking technology? Like, we're leading the show with that. I think it's funny. Some of you are like, Grant, you were a child. That is correct. We knew that long ago. You have any final thoughts before we get to Nick Osen? 608-321-1670. Tyler commenting on live stream. I love New Orleans. The food is the best. What do I have to get? I know the beignets, but are the beignets that much different? Like, it's a deep fried donut, right? A muffalata, I've heard of those from Jerry Jeff. All of my cultural touch points are from songs, from Jerry Jeff Walker songs, Jimmy Buffett songs, Grateful Dead songs, right? That's where I get my cultural touch points for the most part, especially for the East Coast and the South. I've done the West. I've never done Texas, so I guess a lot of my touch points in Texas are from country songs. George Strait. I've been listening to a lot of George Strait, funny enough. But make me a list. Comment the list of the things that I need to eat, because I'll do it. Seafood, I'm normally not a huge seafood person because it tastes like seawater. But if it's fresh, I feel like that's different. That's what everyone tells you. I want to get a shrimp boil at some point. A family in South Carolina went to visit him when I was in grade school. I'd like to go back. South Carolina was a cool place. I'd like to go back and do that every once, at some point in my life. But the family, my family, the family we were staying with, granted it was your family, they did one of those big shrimp boils. And then I guess in the South, maybe it's just my family, I don't know. You don't serve it on plates. You just put a tablecloth on the table and you just dump the bucket on the table and you just stab it. They eat like animals down there in the South. So whatever. I do want to try crawdads, mud bugs. This is Rick comments on live stream. I do want to try that, and I will try that. David in Louisiana, are you actually listening in Louisiana? What are the odds? Says I'll get you some king cake. I feel like I've had king cake before. Isn't that just cake? I mean, I'll eat it. It's fine. Like I will. But I'm talking like, what can I only get in New Orleans? And I guess king cake is very New Orleans, but it's just cake. Is it that different from a coffee cake? I know it's got green and purple on it. Maybe Mike Clemens can be our guide a little bit. I'm going to try to get dinner with Bukowski, too. He loves to show off his cultural knowledge. He really does. And I love Pete. I just also love making fun of Pete. He likes to flex it, which I'll take advantage of because he knows where to go and what to eat and, what to do. So I'm putting together a list, let's say, for Super Bowl week when we're at Radio Row. We'll be there. Thanks to Bill for bringing us along, and thanks to some of our sponsors, for example, Kai Chevytown. Nice enough to send me the sweatshirt, by the way. Been talking a lot on our Eau Claire station, Sports Talk 105.1, about their service department and how excellent it is. Even if you bought your vehicle somewhere else, it's a lot of the same faces and names, been working in that service department for a long time. And I've found this week, because I just got my car serviced last week, I found this week with it this cold, a lot of peace of mind comes with taking your car in. And I know you got to make an appointment. You got to go. And trust me, there's no one who hates making appointments more than me. And having errands. I hate running errands. But it's a great feeling leaving knowing that, all right, this car that obviously you invest in and it's your life. It takes you places and it gets you from point A to point B, from where, work with the family to sports to game to whatever. Leaving after getting it serviced, knowing, all right, even in the cold weather, I'm covered. I can trust this thing. I know it's going to start. I know it's not going to stall out on the interstate when it's 5 degrees and got kids in the back seat. So you can schedule your appointment online. They're a short drive from anywhere, just off of exit 41, the north side of Menominee. Online at ChevyTownUSA.com. Let's take a call and then we'll get to Nick Osen. 608-321-1670. Wisco Sports Show. Who's this? Hello? Hello? I can hear you.
Yeah. You live right now?
Yes. Yeah, we're on. What's going on?
Okay. It sounds like Jordan Love needs to kind of take a little lesson from Kerry Collins. There's a there's a quarterback that could really command a huddle.
Oh, the Bears carry Collins. That's right.
Well, no, Kerry Collins, the quarterback, goes back probably about, 15, 20 years ago.
Well, yeah, but didn't he end his career on the Bears? He was a backup
That could be.
in 2010. Okay, yeah.
You know what? That could be, yeah. Yeah, but there's a guy that there's actually a lot out there on how that guy could really command a huddle. And nobody gave him anything when he grabbed face masks and the whole work. So
interesting.
But
and you saw this firsthand back in the day.
Well, I remember it, but I remember listening to interviews over the years of people that played for the guy, and there was nobody that come back to the huddle whining or anything. So
interesting. Well, now I feel like I need to do some research into Kerry Collins. For a second, I appreciate the call. That's the second best comparison that I've got on the show this year. The first, and it's not going to be beaten. It's not possible to be beaten. When Denny from Holman in week 1 called in and was like, yeah, Rashawn Gary's fine, but he's no Andrew Van Ginkel. Only to be proven pretty correct this year. And Jordan Love and his leadership, well, he's no Kerry Collins. That's complete. And I love it. I'm not mocking it. I never would have thought of that in a million years. Nick Osen, join us to talk Badgers next.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 5 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 4 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Mara had not played that kind of role before. How much did you prepare for him, and how much did he change the game?
Well, he changed the game because he made shots. And you can tell in the little bit of minutes he does get that he's pretty effective. And obviously at 7'3", you know, that's that's a big tree to try to go over around the rim. But his ability to get on the offensive glass, and then so he goes 8 for 11 from the free throw line, which he had not shot it at that way all the time. But you know, he's opportunistic, and the guards did a good job for them in finding him. When we get strung out at times, we get too elongated east and west with chasing ball screens, and he took advantage of what he had.
That's Greg Gard in UCLA last night. The Badgers cannot make it. I thought they were on a 6-game winning streak last night, and then I heard Zach or Ebo say 7 games. I'm actually not entirely sure still. They could not continue the winning streak, whatever the number was. I thought I knew it, and numbers don't stick in my mind. They looked a little sloppy. They look like a team that's probably due for a stinker, and that they'd been in LA for a couple of days, so not totally surprising. And I think the reason I play that comment from Gard is because he said, well, he made shots. UCLA made a lot of shots where I'm watching at home like, yeah, it was pretty well defended. Like they just hit a couple. That will happen, especially when you're in their building. Nick Osen, 24/7 Sports, now joining us. Nick, is that a fair representation of what happened last night? Like UCLA made a lot of shots. Wisconsin was sloppy, but they scored 80-some points. Like that's a game they're going to win most of the time. UCLA shot the ball pretty well.
Grant, I totally agree with you. You know, I've been thinking about really last night's game for a while today. Obviously did kind of some breakdowns and some recaps. And, I even wrote last night, I don't think that Wisconsin played that poorly, right? I think it's just kind of being in LA for a couple days, like you mentioned. That's a long trip. UCLA is a solid team. I mean, they're in the tournament as of now. Obviously, they have some marquee wins early in the year. And like you mentioned, Grant, there were some uncharacteristic turnovers. I think just take away a couple of those, or maybe a couple of those foul calls. I'll even go as far as saying maybe 1 or 2 were phantom calls. It happens in college hoops. They're not going to be perfect. But I completely agree with you. For all those things to happen, a guy that has barely played the last couple months to have a career night and still you lose by just 2 points and cover, I think this Wisconsin team is quite good. And I'll add that you and I have thought that this team was much better than they were projected to be. And I think we're seeing that much of the year.
Well, the bummer. So you mentioned some of the calls last night. I know that more free throws probably benefits Wisconsin. I was having a little bit of a melt. I wasn't melting down in my living room, but I was quite annoyed. I'm like, we can't both be in the double bonus with 7 minutes left. Like, that's just not a product that I want to watch. What did you make of that, Les? And then Greg Gard talking after the game, like the one time that Wisconsin was trying to commit a foul, the refs wouldn't give until then they made it a flagrant. I just thought, it's a free throw parade. I don't want to watch a free throw parade. Sorry.
No, you're totally good. I saw kind of some of your tweets actually as we were getting ready, for the show. And And Grant, I think you're exactly right. I was actually sitting there. That'll be one of the few road games that I wasn't at. And, I kind of got the sense like, dang, some of this is taking away from a really high quality basketball game, right?
Yeah.
Because the shot making, I'm not a huge Mick Cronin guy, but I think he's a decent in game coach. Obviously, guard has been terrific. You're seeing the stars come out like Blackwell, Tanjay were terrific. Sky Clark, Sebastian Mack, like a lot of guys having nice games. And I think that took away a lot of the flow, like you mentioned. I will never really say this. I haven't all year. I do think Wisconsin got a poor whistle, specifically in kind of that double bonus time that affected things. And look, sometimes I heard you in the lead in, obviously, and much of the show. Sometimes it's just not going to be your night. And for Adai Mara to just be 7'3", 235, maybe 240, so he doesn't have kind of a ton of muscle there, and just hit everything that he was really going for. Like, sometimes that happens. And throughout the course of a season, you're just glad that it happened to a quality opponent on the road. And now you have 3 or 4 days to regroup a little bit.
And travel back and kind of get back in gear. I saw a lot of anti-Steven Crowell tweets at the end of the game. I thought he played pretty well. There were some moments, especially late in the first half, early in the second, where he was looking for the ball. I actually thought he played pretty well. And really, since Guard called him out after the Illinois game, I haven't really had many complaints about Steven Crowell. There will be games where he doesn't get the ball and he doesn't get opportunities. That's not really a him problem. I thought the second half against Ohio State, like if they would have just kept feeding him, they run away with that game and it doesn't come down to, free throws at the end. I haven't really had any complaints about Steven Crowell, and they're just for as deep as they are and as much talent as they have, they're still not the same unless Steven Crowell has been playing really well, and he has been recently.
Grant, I totally agree. I think that a lot of those people are the same people that are going to attack a Greg Gard like you see right throughout the year, or for some reason come at Gilmore. Like, I don't think they actually know basketball and follow this team. So I think it's ridiculous. To me, Steven Crowell was the biggest reason for the first 3 games winning in this winning streak, and 4 out of 5. I think Blackwell had a massive game, and then he's kind of continued that. But Crowell has been terrific. And initially, I was like a little bit, concerned. But one of his putbacks early in the game, I think he missed it, grabbed the board, and finished. Like, that's showing me some aggression. And I'll be the first one to say, okay, this could have been better. This could have been kind of improved with Steve. But I think he's been terrific. You're just not going to grow 4 inches in the course of a game, right?
No.
And that's a tough matchup. And I don't think that the posts between Crowell and Winter, I don't think they have struggled defensively a lot, but I think that was just a tough matchup. Whether guys are incredibly quick and athletic or just simply 4 or 5 inches taller, that's going to be tough. And again, even with all that said, they were still in a position to potentially win the game.
I think Nolan Winter has made really nice strides this year. He's also had moments here and there where it's like, yeah, he's still young, and he doesn't always collect the ball with sure hands like I'd like him to, but also like sometimes the feed pass is down around his knees, like the ball just can't be there, So what have you seen, the ups and the downs, but a lot of ups for Nolan Winter this year? I've been pretty pleased with him so far. And on a deeper team like this one, like he doesn't need to be perfect every night. There's plenty of room for him to play and grow without costing this team wins and losses. What have you thought of Nolan Winter's season so far?
No, exactly, Grant. I think if he's given you 10 or 11 and 6, like that's generally going to be enough. And to me, other than John Tanjay, Nolan Winter was actually the biggest story in my eyes the first month and a half of the season, because you started to see this player that Greg Gard and Joe Krabbenhoft have talked some great things about. So I think you started to see that. I will note, if you look at his box scores, a couple of the recent games have been a little bit tougher for him. I think like 3 out of the last 4 maybe, but that is okay because he's not going to be Superman every night. I still love seeing him confidently go into that jumper like you saw early on last game when they were just hitting from distance. I still think that he battles defensively, but again, there's room in that frame to still put on another 8, 10, 12 pounds of muscle. Then you can really get to that star level. But as a whole, Grant, I think actually you're starting to see his growth because of this coaching staff, and he's not shy of giving them credit as well.
Well, and I want to ask you about Klesmit, but since you mentioned the coaching staff, this has been retooled with more of an NBA, I guess, idea. Greg Gard talked about how he wanted to build this more like an NBA program at the college level. Nolan Winter is more of an NBA big. He prototypes, and I think I talked about this with you when I was at the Kohl's Center last year a little bit when we were talking about Nolan Winter. Like, he's got NBA tools. This coaching staff and this methodology from this coaching staff might benefit Nolan Winter maybe more than it benefits anybody else.
I think that's really well said. I actually was talking to a, kind of scout agent type guy within the last couple of weeks. He asked me who I thought could make the pros on this team, and I named a few guys. And of course, I said for sure if they continue to develop, Blackwell and Winter, and he agreed. I think that's a great point from you because he's got that size. He's fluid, right? He looks much more fluid this year in his motion. He can shoot. He's got the wingspan, and he can defend a little bit. Strength and aggression need to continue to grow, but you're exactly right. And this is a perfect spot because I often enjoy your commentary, Grant, and how we tend to feel the same way about guard and just how these things should be approached. The foreshadowing and kind of foreseeing from him and the staff in terms of playing offense this way and adding a Kirk Penny, man, I think it has been terrific. And frankly, I think it's going to continue to help with recruiting, if not this cycle, then going forward. I really do think it's an exciting and smart move from guard.
Well, and why wouldn't you want to come play in an environment like this, right? Wisconsin's always won. They've always been a respectable program that's won. I don't know that recruits have looked at it, especially, let's say, the previous 5 years leading up to this. It's like, okay, but can I come there and make a name for myself? Players had over the years. This environment now, like all of the three-point attempts, the pace with which they're playing. Max Klesmit is a guy who's, I think, fits in this era. I think you'd fit in any era of Badgers basketball. And by era, I mean that like with a small e, over the last 10 or 15 years. Like, he's got a skill set that can be used on any of these teams. This team does not have the defensive chops of previous teams, but man, in the last couple of minutes, when you need to dig down and get a stop, I think Klesmit on ball is still maybe one of their better options. I think he's been lost a little bit trying to come back from that injury. His shot hasn't been falling. He's had lapses and turnovers. Is he starting to get more comfortable? Because I think he is a really important piece on this team, and I still don't know that he's hit his stride yet.
Yeah, I certainly think he's starting to get a little bit more comfortable. To me, it was never, his game or his skill set, like you mentioned. I don't think it was a lack of confidence or anything, but I think it was mentally just kind of seeing his role, right? Because at times we saw last year, man, even in successful games, even with Storr and Hepburn, like Max was the one. Like he scored 25 plus several big games. And I think this year, when you've got two really solid posts, a star in John Tanjay, a star in the making in Blackwell. Heck, even Kamari McGee is coming off and getting you double figures a couple times. Like, it really can be tough. But if you're asking me, I just was talking about it with somebody recently, Grant, you need a bucket late or you need a stop late on ball, like you mentioned. I'm not sure I am taking somebody over Max just because we've seen what he can do. I've got so much respect for really how he approaches things. I got to speak with him and John Blackwell really in depth coming into this season, which is when my wheels really started to turn like this team's being slept on a little bit, quite honestly. And we've seen that. But I completely agree. And I think there's no question. If you want to get to that second weekend, you need Max shooting 40% from deep, 50%, and being a top three guy.
Yeah. The next month, we can wrap up with this. So they have Nebraska, Maryland, Northwestern, Indiana. They get Nebraska and Indiana at home, which I think is those are the two teams that I would want at home out of that foursome. What are you going to look for? What's in the front of your mind over this next month? If this team's going to continue to play at a high level, not suffer a swoon in the month of February, like maybe we've seen in the past, and if they're going to continue to kind of build momentum towards the postseason eventually, what are you looking for in these next four?
Yeah, I'll go kind of from a macro into a micro. I wrote to kind of some of my readers last night. If this team wants to do what they're capable of doing, I think a 4-1 stretch over this next five is very doable and possible. I'd pencil in maybe the game at Maryland as a loss, but like Iowa struggling right now, Indiana very cold at times. And then in terms of more of the micro, what I want to see, I'd like to see comfortable Max Klesmit, like you mentioned, Nolan Winter getting back a little bit to what we have seen and just not kind of those uncharacteristic turnovers. Because even though they have been playing with more pace, even though this Kirk Penny fluid offense, like there is more movement and maybe potential, the story was these guys have still not turned the ball over too much and they've gotten to the free throw line. And I'm sure you've seen, Grant, they're on pace to set an all-time record, not just Wisconsin, but NCAA, some of the best free throw shooting of all time in terms of percentages. So continue with that and just kind of clean some things up defensively. It is easier said than done, but I do believe they're capable. And if so, I'll continue to say it, that this is a second weekend team. And I'd really like that, not just for these veterans, but this coaching staff that I know we speak highly of, but I don't think everybody really sees what they've done and how they've shifted and adapted in this era.
No, just getting to the second weekend would do wonders for this team. I was texting with a buddy who's a UW alum and he works in sports, and he's like, I'm beginning to believe ... in a Sweet 16, as if to say, well, I still don't think they're going to the Final Four, but like, could we get out of the first weekend? And I'm like, that would just getting to the second weekend would do wonders for the way that this coaching staff is talked about and the way that this program's talked about. Because even if they, let's say they finish top 3 in the Big Ten or whatever, they have an amazing regular season and they lose in the first round, I think some fans will still recognize a very good season and a program that's doing very well. But we're really, it's getting dry, Nick. Like we're really getting thirsty. It's been a while since they've got out of that first weekend. It feels important to do it this year. And I don't want to get too far down the road, but since you mentioned it, like I do think that is really important.
Yeah, I totally do too. A first round loss, like I think that would be a tough pill to swallow for many fans, just because I think this team, I'll also note real quick, is matchup proof almost. I think that they can beat you in multiple ways, which I think is really smart and efficient. I just think it's going to come down to basically jump shots and free throws. I think that's obvious, but like you talked about the NBA feel, not a lot of mid-range going on. So it's 3-pointers. If those are going down, team's tough to beat. And even Mick Cronin had a lot of good things to say about this Wisconsin program, even after they won the game. I found that interesting, and I'm really intrigued to follow the rest of the way, Grant.
Mick looks tan, by the way. Looks like the West Coast is agreeing with him. He looks good. He looks coming. He looks pissed off a lot because the last couple clips I've seen, he's been bashing his team or bashing his travel, but at least he looks tan. He's getting outside. Thank you, Nick. We'll follow your work at 24/7 Sports. Thank you for the time, always.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, my friend.
Nick Osen, 24/7 Sports, CBS as well. And you can follow him on Twitter. I believe he is the real Nick Osen. We're just a couple minutes away. We'll turn things over at 6 o'clock to the Bill Michaels Huddle. Mike Clemens going to join him tonight at 6:30, and he will have some of the audio from Ben Johnson's introductory press conference with the Bears earlier today. And you know what? I'll play a clip for you from that just to kind of get everyone in the football state of mind before Bill takes over at 6 o'clock, because, of course, he mentioned the Packers. It wouldn't be a Bears introductory press conference without mentioning the Packers. I think it mostly means nothing. But as Packers fans, we can kind of take our pot shots at it. Let's do that next as we wrap things up.
This is the Wisco Sports Show with Grant Bills on the Wisconsin Sports Zone Radio Network.
The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 3 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 2 minutes. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 1 minute. The Wisco Sports Show will resume in 30 seconds.
Wisco Sports Show. Bill Michaels Huddle just a couple minutes away. I want to play you a soundbite from Ben Johnson earlier today. I have to address one thing. Before we got to Nick, we got a call. Didn't say his name. That's fine. On the Jordan Love leadership topic, this caller said, you know who Jordan Love needs to model himself after is Kerry Collins. To which I said, the guy who played for the Bears at the end? Because I was thinking of the guy when Jay Cutler got hurt. Oh, Kerry Collins. And then Caleb Haney came in. And I still know nothing about Kerry Collins. RJ came in over the break and was like, Kerry Collins was like the most mild-mannered guy ever. What was that guy talking about? I don't know. And Kurt Hogue must have been listening for some reason, texted me and said, Grant, that was Todd Collins. Oh, yes. Todd Collins was the guy who ended his career. By the way, Kerry Collins started his career in 95, played till 2011. Todd Collins started his career in 95, played till 2010. Okay? Todd Collins ended his career with the Bears. Whether or not I have the right Collins, I still don't understand the point that caller is trying to make, and that's not to be disrespectful. I just need a little bit more. So that's research I need to go do after that. I'm still not 100% sure what we were driving at there. That's fine. Here's Ben Johnson at his introductory press conference talking about staying in the division, the NFC North.
I've got tremendous amount of respect for the coaches and the players in this league. Having competed against them for the last 6 years. Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, you're talking about two guys that are up for Coach of the Year awards as the season ends here. And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
So people are reading into this and talking about it. Is he disrespecting Matt LaFleur? I think he's just throwing some red meat to the media and the fan base because the Packers are the rival. I don't think it's anything. I love the word choice, and to be quite frank with you.
Who
writes that? I like that. That's old timey.
To be quite frank with you.
He looked, Bears fans, I'm sorry, he looked a little Adam Gase-ish. I'm sorry, I couldn't get that out of my head watching him today without the baseball hat on. With the baseball hat on, he looks a little Adam Gase-ish. Means nothing about his coaching acumen. It's just a comment on his appearance, nothing else. Comment on the live stream. I can address this before we go. Tyler in Massachusetts says, Grant, what about these Bucks trade rumors? So here's what I am understanding. Jimmy Butler wants out of Miami. He wants to go to Phoenix. Phoenix wants him. Phoenix desperately wants to get rid of Bradley Beal. No one in basketball wants Bradley Beal. No one wants Bradley Beal, the player. He's diminished. He can't defend. He doesn't score at a high level anymore. He's not available. And his contract might just be the worst contract in basketball. I don't know. Ben Simmons. Bill Simmons always does the worst contracts. I don't know where Bradley Beal ranks. He's got to be near the top. No one wants Bradley Beal. And because of the constraints that the CBA has put on teams with high spending, it's not very easy to make trades. So the whole league is sitting, waiting around for Phoenix because they can't offload Bradley Beal. Miami, who suspended, they announced they're suspending Jimmy Butler another 2 games today for conduct detrimental or failure to provide services or whatever. They're like, we want to trade Jimmy. We can't because no one wants Bradley Beal because he sucks and his contract sucks worse. So that's where we stand. I'm sure that the Bucks are at least listening. And I know that they're getting mentioned because, Bradley Beal's agent and the Suns people need to drum this up to make it seem like, hey, guys, it's happening, even though no one wants Bradley Beal. If the Bucks trade for Bradley Beal, I got a tweet earlier today. It's like, hey, Grant, if the Bucks acquire Bradley Beal, you're going to need to talk me off the ledge. Brother, if the Bucks acquire Bradley Beal, I will be over the ledge before you even get to the ledge. So don't expect me to talk you off of it. I would hate it. But that's where it stands, it would seem. Bucks game canceled tonight. Perfect. To watch and listen to the Bill Michaels Huddle. He'll talk with Mike Clemens. Mark Schofield will join him as next. That's coming up in 2 minutes.